Hey everyone, welcome back. And today we have with us the Kevin Harris, as known. I call him our hero, right? Hero's Edge, great coaching program. And I've heard Kevin talk about goals many, many times. And today we get to listen to his insight about real estate agents and goal setting, what they struggle with when goal setting, what they struggle with hitting goals, and just diving right into how to make the right goals. Is there such a thing as doing the right goals? Like, is there a thing as doing the wrong goals? Like, let's just talk about goals. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. This is awesome. I always love when we do these. Goals is something that's really passionate to me. I was a football coach, obviously. If you look me up, and you have to have goals when you're trying to accomplish anything. One of the things that I always have noticed, and it's not just with realtors, but it is a lot with business owners, but specifically in real estate. We get into the business. Most of us get into the business because we have a service background. Not all of us, but most of us. And so we're really good at the service part of real estate. But what we don't normally have is a lot of business acumen or skills, and we don't have a lot of entrepreneurial skills. Like, we didn't bring that into our quiver, so to speak. And one of those, though, is when you're creating your business. Without a goal, I always say, if I gave you a bow and arrow and I said, go hit the target and I'll give you $100, the first question should be, where's the target? So there's no way to actually hit anything unless you know where you're trying to hit.
Yep.
We all know this, because the reality is most of us don't get into a car, even if we know where we're going. We still turn on Waze or Google Maps, right? Because we want to avoid the traffic jams. We want to make sure all that stuff, right? Yeah. Well, our business should be the same way. We should at least have a roadmap of some kind to get us to some type of destination, right? And one of the things that I teach when I'm talking about goals is, most people think of goals like we think of the 1st of January goals, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to lose 10 pounds. I'm gonna read 50 books. I'm going to cold plunge, all this stuff.
Yeah.
But we also know about the 3rd week of January, most of those don't happen.
Right.
And unfortunately, when realtors get into the business, a lot of them kind of they treat their goals like that. They kind of think that they're hopes. They're like, I hope to hit 100,000. I hope to sell 15 homes. And I always say, and I have an actual class about this, a coaching session I do, that is, what's a goal, okay? And what's a standard? Because a goal, my definition of a goal is something that you want, but a standard is something you accept.
That's good.
And I use this example a lot, and you can, and when you watch this, hopefully it'll hit home a little bit. I don't think that most adults wrestle with whether they're going to brush their teeth in the morning before they go out.
No, you don't wake up and say, I have a goal today.
Yeah.
My goal is, if I could just brush my teeth, I hit my goal.
Correct. However, if you've ever raised kids, at one point it was a goal for your child to brush their teeth.
It's so true.
Right?
It was a goal.
Yeah. And so the reality is, at some point, that goal turned into a standard. Like, you just don't, even if you walked out and you remembered you didn't brush your teeth, most of us would go back inside, right? And unfortunately, most realtors, most business owners will treat their business with goals, but they won't treat them like standards.
Or turn them into
standards. And so I always say, you have to have a specific set of goals that you treat as standards, which means you don't put your head on the pillow at night. You don't close the books on Friday. You don't go play golf. You don't go get the pedicure. You don't get the manicure until you do what A, B, and C. Until you talk to 5 people, until you do the open house, until whatever it is, right? And if you start treating some of your goals specifically around lead generation, finding people to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, having those conversations, if those are standards in your world, like, I don't walk out of the house until I brush my teeth kind of standards, then what you will see is your business start to blossom.
That's good.
And the reality is, if you don't do that, then it's just a goal. It's just a hope. It's something that, I'd love to have a 6-pack. I mean, I
wish. How about a wish?
Yeah.
I wish
I wish
could
to
do
have a
this.
6-pack. I can have a 6-pack. I know physically I could have a 6-pack ab, but I also like tacos. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a goal to have a 6-pack, but it's not a standard because I like tacos. And until I decide I'm going to give up tacos and I'm going to give up margaritas, it's not going to happen.
That goal's not going to happen.
It's not going to. And so it's about priorities, right?
So what do you think is the difference between a strategy and a goal? Because they kind of sound alike. Hey, I have a goal, and you treat goals as the strategy because
Right.
you write them down. Yet I think a strategy is slightly different. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think a strategy is something you have a plan around and you actually do. Like when I was a football coach, we always had a strategy going into each game. And that strategy was built off of research and, watching film, understanding who our team was. And so there was some actual buy-in to the strategy. There was actual, like, you had a little bit of sweat equity into it, And so you had some, if you didn't do it, there was a little bit of pain of because you'd taken that time, right?
Okay.
To me, a goal, there's none of that. I can have goals all day long, but there's not really any pain point other than the consequence of not doing it. There's not going to be a pain point if I decide I'm gonna do 5 open houses a week or a month for the next year. But if that's just the goal, if I don't do it, the only thing I'll lose is projected income.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. So let's go through some of the goals that real estate agents have to be aware of. And we got this right from the Leads Workshop. Where's the Leads Workshop? Here we go. Right from the Leads Workshop. All right. So GCI, gross commission income. That is a goal that every year we should have, right? But the gross commission goal is not the strategy. So I
Correct.
think that's different. That's the goal. Then we have volume of sales, which is the sales price, right? We put the goal. That's not the strategy. How are you going to hit that goal? We have units, number of homes we're going to sell. 20 homes, 50 homes, 100 homes. Again, that is a goal. That's not a strategy. That's not a plan. Business expenses, sure, you should have that budgeted. That's more like a budgeted goal. And then we have, what is your net going to be? So those are the broad goals. That's usually how people start. So Kevin, when you view a realtor's goals for the year with GCI volume, units, which is the basics, right? How do you advise them with those goals?
That's a great question. I think it's one of the biggest. I think it's one of the biggest holes in most realtors' businesses because, and you've encountered this, I'm sure, just as often as I have. When you ask someone, let's just say first year agent, what do you want to make your first year? Almost without exception, it's $100,000. And when you actually dissect that from a coaching standpoint, the reason most people say $100,000 is because it's 6 figures, and they've never made 6 figures before,
Right.
and so they think that 6 figures is going to solve whatever problem or whatever thing that they have in their life. And the problem with it is that what we know is 6 figures in the when you own a business is not the same as 6 figures when you net. And so when someone says they want to make $100,000 or $200,000, the very next question I ask them is that what you want in your personal bank account, or is that what you want to make gross? Because it's gross commission income, but they forget about the G in gross commission income.
Yeah,
They
it's
just
really
think it's
gross.
Yeah, yeah. They think it's just commission income. And I'm like, no, it's gross commission, because to that point, what you said, there's business expenses, there's fallout, there's just because you have 4 under contract every single month doesn't mean you're going to close 4, right? There's all sorts of reasons. And if you don't take those reasons, at least project what the possible strategy is going to be around, if you want to have 4 closings, you may have to have 6 in the pipeline, And so most realtors don't think about that, at least when they first get going. So when I'm coaching someone on those numbers and they say, I want to be the top producer, I'm like, okay, so why? What? And then how? The reality is most of them don't even know how to get there. Like, they're not building that roadmap, the where the leads are going to come from, where the conversations are going to come from, because that's really the strategy. It's
the strategy.
Yeah, because if you don't have that, it just turns into, like I said,
The wish.
The wish.
I wish I could make.
Yeah.
Okay, I love it. Okay, so we have here calls made appointments gone on, listings taken, listings sold. Then we have calls made, appointments gone on, buyers taken, buyers closed. And then your database, we have calls made, appointments taken, referrals taken, and referrals closed. So how do you help someone tackle when they say, I want to make 100,000? How many goals do I have to make, Kevin, to get 100,000, to make 100,000? How many listings do I need to take to make 100,000? Like, how do you coach them through the strategy of, and I call this the conversion numbers, right? Because you just don't know your conversion yet.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a very good question, because for me, and when we've coached together, one of the things that I've realized is, what you just mentioned, all the things that you just mentioned, that you can define them into lead and lag measures. So lead measures are things that you do to predict what you're going to have. Lag measures are the result of what the activities you did. And so, and you have to have both. You have to, because the conversion rate really applies more to the lag measures than it does the lead measures. When you're talking about conversion, that means you're assuming that you're actually having the conversations in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm. Good.
And then it's, how are you converting those conversations? So there's two different, I guess, strategies. Is how are you going to have the conversations, and then how good are you at converting those conversations into opportunities? And so, listings taken, conversations, deals closed, buyers reps, all those things that we talk about, all those terms. You can really define those in those two categories, lead and lag. And then it's making sure that you put enough people in the pipeline. And, that's, to a lot of realtors, that's a scary conversation, because they think of it as lead generation, but the reality is it's just having conversations. It's all it is. How many people you having conversations with day, you can convert that based off of what either your known conversion rates of those conversations, or statistical historical rates of the industry, until you have your own. And then you can literally, it's a math equation. I always say, the reality is you can almost define everything that we do into a math equation. And so if you can, then it's just a matter of, working the equation. 20 conversations in a open house will get you one lead. I'm not saying that is, but let's say that's the conversion rate. Well, then how many conversations you need to have to get 5 leads? It's 100. So it's really knowing those numbers, or at least having those in your strategy, will allow you then to actually get a little bit more predictable in your business.
That's a great tip. I tell agents, hey, before we know your conversion numbers, let's just figure out your timeline. So let's say, do you have 3 hours a day? Instead of per call, let's just time block. 3 hours a day, make as many calls as you can in those 3 hours. Then we'll get some numbers. Because you have to start somewhere. You have to write something, or you could go the other way around. You could say, instead of my goal is 3 hours of calls a day, well, my goal is 20 conversations a day. It could go either way, but what if those 20 conversations take you 4, 5, 6 hours just because you talk to Aunt Sue for 30, 40 minutes, right? So
right.
Somewhere there's that balance, and each person is different, because there's a difference between making 20 for sale by owner conversations. You're not going to sit there for 30 minutes. Well, if you do, that's a good news, right? You pretty much have a listing that day, right? But making 20 expire calls to set appointments, 20 Facebook calls to set appointments, they can be done like, okay, let's just go. Where calling your database could take longer. So I would say create the strategy of time as a reference point, or the number of calls as a reference point, and then from there say, these are my numbers, right? Because as your coach, I can't give you your conversion numbers of how many it's going to take for you to get this.
No, I love that. I think what I heard from what you said, though, as a coach, is you actually got to have the conversations. Most realtors will, or a lot of realtors, I won't say most, a lot of realtors will, they'll do exactly the opposite of what you just said. They'll worry so much about conversion rates and getting the script perfect, and I've got to practice. And the reality is, in our business, it's about going and what I call playing the game. You got to get on the field, and so learn a little script, a piece of a script, have it in front of you, but then pick up the phone, because the more activity you have, the more you're going to then know what that conversion rate is probably going to be. And you can't have a sample size of 2. Right, right.
Yeah.
It's got to be a decent amount of numbers. So it's one of the reasons why most coaches, including yourself, including me, one of the first activities we tell them to do is start talking to their sphere, because they already have contact information. They already have some type of relationship, and it's the easiest way to get them into activity. The more activity they have, the more conversations they have, whether it's real estate or not, the more practice they get, and then they start having conversion because they feel more comfortable.
I love it. Okay, so when we talk about database and making the calls or setting the goals to the database, I want to discuss in this part, when you make a call to your database and you're not obviously harassing them for business, you're just having a conversation, right? What does that conversion look like if you just make a call and never speak to them again? They never hear from you. They don't get an email, a note, a text, a follow-up, a marketing. Because that's part of conversion too, because you could call your database, but then have nothing in return. So let's talk about the converting part of it, that it's just not in the call.
No, it's not. Because the reality is you have to be the realtor of choice, and it has to be in their mind regardless of whether you know them or not. That's the goal. The goal is to be, when they think real estate or they hear about real estate, they think of you. And if they are a relative or someone that you are a longtime friend, those kind of things, that doesn't change the fact that they still probably know 3, 4, 5, 10 realtors in their sphere. And really, you have to consistently reach out to your sphere and to people that you know and your past clients and all those things to stay top of mind. And I have been guilty of it. I'm sure you probably have been guilty of it when we get our business going. But I don't know of many realtors who do a lot of business that did not lose a deal. I would say didn't lose it. They didn't actually ask for it, from a relative or a friend that bought or sold a house, but they knew that we were a realtor. And,
right.
And it's just, and
So
usually if you back up, which is what I had to do, I won't throw on the podcast, I won't throw the person under the bus, but the reality is I lost 3 deals to one of my, let's just call them acquaintances, that we were very close. And of course, everybody gets upset. Everybody's like, well, you know, I'm a realtor and all this stuff. But then if you're a business owner, you have to stamp back and go, how do they know I'm a realtor other than they just know? Like, we oftentimes will put the burden of them remembering on them. But as professional business owners, it's actually on us. So that means you have to email, you have to text, you have to send them market updates, you have to just talk real estate, but you also just have to have a relationship with them. You know, just because they're a friend or a relative doesn't mean that they trust you to in a real estate transaction.
Or see you working, or see the business you're doing, or see you take action. Sometimes you might not have a business, so therefore you decide not to do activities. So you don't go visit builders and post about it. You don't do open houses and post about it. Don't go networking and post about it. You're just waiting for the deal in order to get into action.
100%. 100%. And it drives me crazy that we have this great thing called social media that is 100% free, right? And it is the best marketing platform on the planet in the history of marketing. And yet most of us just don't use it to its advantage. Every one of our relatives, friends, and acquaintances are on social media, without exception.
Yep.
And if you want to act like a professional and be a professional, and you want them to know you as a professional, you should be on those platforms showing them that you're a professional.
Like what you do.
Yeah.
What you do for a living. If a doctor never stepped foot inside a hospital, are they a doctor?
I know.
So,
they have a doctorate.
They have a doctorate. So you have a license, yet you never step foot in those spaces where real estate happens. Yeah. I love that. Okay. So what is the biggest fear when agents create goals? Let's go back to goals. What's their biggest fear around writing that number? Like, some of them are scared to death to write it down. Why is that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to just that that fear of rejection and that fear of what if I don't hit it? I put a goal out there. It's written. If I just say it in my mind, it won't, and I don't hit it, no one knows, right?
Nobody knows because it's not on paper.
That's right. And so the risk is not as, it's not great at all. But you write it down, there's a saying, what you measure increases, and what you hold accountable increases exponentially.
Boy.
And the reality is when we write it down, there's a little bit of accountability there. Not a lot, but there's a little bit, because now you've put it in the ether. You've put it out there that this is what I want. And when you do that, though, there's no way. I've never met a single, and I'm not saying there's nobody out there, but I've never met a single person who has hit the things that they want to hit without first writing it down and making sure that there is some accountability around it. And I'm sure we'll talk about this in a different episode, but the reality is we have got to get out of our head about rejection and about fear of not hitting things, because you can't. Our goals should be so big and so monstrous that it is going to hurt. It is going to be painful. We are going to have rejection, but it's okay, because it's the things that we're looking for. And if you already had it, you wouldn't be looking for it.
That's so good. Okay. So they're afraid to fail. They're afraid to not hit it. They're afraid to look dumb. I like the writing it down as step one. What do you think would be step two with the goal to truly, not guarantee, but have a better shot at hitting it? What do you think it would be?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that goes back to strategy, because once you decide you're going to lose, 20 pounds, or once you decide you're going to run a marathon, or once you decide you're going to sell 25 homes, the process is the same. The next question should be how?
How?
That's the beginning of the roadmap. It's the beginning of the steps. It's the beginning of the strategy. When I was a football coach and we were going to win state, that was the goal. The next question was, well, how are we going to do it? And then we had to start building a program. It took us 2.5 years, almost 3 years, to build a program and a group of boys and all the things that we had to do to hit that goal. And it's the same thing when I got into real estate. That's the reason why I had reasonable success pretty early on. Not because trust me, I'm not the best realtor, but I'm pretty good at goal setting, and I'm pretty good at understanding that once you set the goal, you got to have a strategy behind it. And to me, that's number two, is at least start figuring out what's the pain that you're about to go through. It's always growth. What's the pain that you're going to have? What are you going to have to learn? What are you going to have to actually do to get there?
So what happens when it's, the first quarter and you're already missing that target? You're already missing the strategy that's going to help you hit the goal. What advice would you have to that agent that, gosh, I made such a huge goal, and then here are the strategic steps to hit that goal, and I'm failing every day. Every day I'm not making the calls. Every day I'm not doing the activities. Because most of the time, would you not agree, they fail because they don't do the activities? They don't fail because they've done all the activities and they just are not getting the deals.
Yeah, I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit. I've never coached or heard of in this case, an agent, but I'd say any business owner that has failed by doing all the activities.
Never.
No.
Me neither. Not once.
I will tell you, without exception, at least in my coaching world, every single person I've ever coached, whether it's group coaching, or one-on-one coaching, if they set a goal and they start falling behind, there's always a reason of inactivity, or not necessarily inactivity, but I was supposed to make 5 calls a day. I was supposed to do 2 open houses a week. Whatever that is, that didn't get done. It's the activity. And the thing is we can't, the goal's so big, even if it's not big, per standard, but it's so big because it's so far out there and it's such a long way away. Like if you want to do 200,000 in GCI in a year, well, you got 12 months to do that. So the reality is, if that's all you focus on, most people will wait until month 10 to try to actually start exercising that goal, right? And then in that case, you've already lost. And so you have to break it down into those bite-sized pieces, which eventually gets to the activity, focusing on the activity, not the result. And
love it.
And the reality is, if you do that, if you focus on 5 calls a day, or 5 for sale by owner conversations, 2 appointments a week, whatever those are that you decide on, and this is a plug to both the Leads Workshop and to coaching in general, that's what coaching's for. right? That's
what it's for.
that's what it's for, is to have somebody else outside your world to say, "Hey, did you do it or did you not?" And I always say with a lot of my one-on-one clients, I'm going to ask you two questions, and based off that answer, I'm going to ask you another question. And I'll put it on tape. Did you do it or did you not? And the activity should be such that you can answer it that way, and not a yes or a no. It should be that simple. So you break it all the way down to a simple question. And then if they didn't do it, the next question is, so do you want to increase your activity next week or do you want to decrease your goal? No judgment behind it. But because we've already did the roadmap, there's only one way to go. And if you didn't do it, so you're telling me by your actions that you don't want to hit that goal. Well, no, I want to hit that goal. Well, then we need to get more activity because we missed out this week.
Oh, that's good. Well, I have a saying here is we don't move the target. We evaluate, we adjust the strategy. So now let's talk about, in a perfect world as a coach, they're doing the activities, yet they're not getting the results. That's a dream client because they're actually doing the work, yet they're frustrated. They're not hitting the target. There's something in between the conversion. So what advice do you give those agents who are actually busting their butts out there trying to do it and they're not getting a deal?
Yeah, you're right. It's the dream client because I always say every lead conversion, every lead source, I call it lead lever, but every lead source out there works. There's a conversion on every one of them. You want to go door knocking? You will get an appointment. However, you may have to knock 1,000 doors to do it.
Yes.
And if you go out and knock 1,000 doors, first off, I'm going to high five you and chest bump you simply because you did the activity that no one else would do. But then the next thing I would say, why don't we focus, because you've proven that you will do activity, let's put you into activity that's maybe a little bit more conversion friendly, right? Because you said you've proven the because that's the first hurdle, right? Are you willing to do the activity? And there's usually two reasons why you're not, if you're doing activity, there's only, in my opinion, there's two reasons why you're not getting the result you want. One, the activity's wrong. So again, the door knocking scenario, you're doing the activity, but you want to have 2 appointments a week. Well, the reality is that's probably not where you should be focusing your time. You may switch to for sale owners or open houses or, whatever.
Knock on the right doors.
Knock on the right doors, narrowing the doors that you're knocking on, getting information, things like that. Or it has to do with what you're saying or what the conversion conversation. And that's a training. I always say that's the easier conversation because simply it is a training that most people try to do before they actually start doing the activity, but it never works that way. You can never get good at conversation and conversion until you actually start doing the activity. It doesn't work the other way around.
That's how you get good at anything.
100%.
You have to do the activity. You have to make the calls. You have to
100%,
feel it out.
100%.
So I love that. So we have, it sounds like your biggest tip is first write down the goal, which is very different than write down the strategies to hit the goal. And then thirdly, get the accountability. Even if it's showing the goal to your friend, to your coworker, to your boss, to your husband, to somebody, once somebody else has seen your commitment to that goal, that raises up the level. And then the fourth thing you said is don't quit, change the strategy. Don't minimize the goal, ramp up the activities, evaluate what's happening, have someone else look over it so wait a minute, I'm saying the wrong things. This would work better. How do I change that? Sometimes it's the time of day or the lead or the source or the marketing. There's always a reason why it's not converting.
Right. But you can't answer those reasons unless you're doing the activity first. And I think to me, that's always where this lands is 99.9% of the time. And you know this, the answer usually is you're not doing the activity. But if you are, then it's the other things. And I will say this about accountability. We're no longer kids, right? We don't have a mom and dad that forces us into accountability. We're all adults. I say when I talk to my clients is you have to give me permission to hold you accountable because I can't hold someone accountable who's not willing to be accountable. Even though you may say, yes, I want to, but if you actually don't, if you're not open to that, if you're not open to coaching, you are going to struggle with the coaching that you get because you're going to think it's an offense. You're going to think that something that you maybe, I don't like you, or those kind of things. And it's none of those things. It's,
Yeah.
I'm trying to help you hit your goal, but you have to, whether it's me, whether it's yours, I would not recommend your spouse, just FYI. I have done that myself. Good luck with that. But I will say your broker, a peer, you have to give them permission to tell you the truth, to speak truth into your business, because that's how you actually improve your business.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, friends, tune in for more from the Leads Workshop and the Kevin Harris. And the next Leads Workshop will be coming every 6 weeks. We teach it. So if you want all of the information inside of this, sign up at leadsworkshop.com. See you next time.